Hi, and welcome to this edition of PLMA Live. I'm Jodi Daley, and with me is PLMA President Brian Sharoff.
Yes, greetings from our studio here in New York.
Well, another year has begun, and there's a lot happening in private label. The Nielsen numbers for last year are out, and store brands again displayed their strength. Dollar market shares went up from 19.1% to 19.5%, while units held steady at 23.6%. Now, dollar volume grew more than 5% in all outlets as store brands outpaced national brands by more than 2 to 1.
Understanding what all these percentages mean is, of course, a little bit like reading tea leaves. Dollar share went up because of inflation and commodity prices. National brands were also cutting prices to regain market share, so that contributed to an improvement in dollar share. And consumers have been trading up to premium private label, which shows up in higher revenue at the checkout.
Well, we may get a better picture of these sales numbers from James Russo, Vice President, Global Insights at Nielsen. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, what is the mood of consumers today?
Well, the mood of the consumer is one of being very pragmatic. The U.S. consumer has been dealing with the recession for the better part of 4 years. So there's an uncertainty that permeates this consumer, and we can see that within the consumer confidence data that Nielsen publishes. It's very much a consumer that is planning their spending, that is monitoring their spending. There are certain consumer segments that are starting to emerge from the recession before others, but clearly from a macro perspective, this consumer is very pragmatic.
Well, how is this reflected in the way they shop? The stores they visit, the products they buy?
It's really a fascinating time in retail because there's a whole set, if you will, of retail stores and formats that are open to the consumer. The positive side of this economic climate is companies, retailers, and manufacturers have the attention of the consumer. They're really monitoring their spending closely. So when you look at what the consumer is spending and where they're shopping, it's not only a discount retailer, it could also be a high-end retailer. The point is that they're really evaluating their consumption, and they're looking at each spending and each level of transaction.
Well, what about store brands? Are you seeing any changes in consumer attitudes toward private label products?
Yeah, the story of store brands, much like this economy, is not one of a momentary shift. When you look at the consumer pre-recession, and Nielsen statistics point that the average share, if you will, of store brands across the entire store was around 20%. And it's interesting to note in 2008, that jumps up to about 22-23% in terms of unit share. And what we see is that continuing post-recession. So the first point I want to make is that we are in a new normal as it relates to store brands. Consumers are really responding to store brands. They're really considering them in their decision set. When you look at the attributes that consumers relate to store brands, it is higher quality. They're really considering them on par with branded products. That's a really important distinction for consumers. The other converging point is what retailers are doing in terms of getting behind store brands. And this goes beyond just the recession in 4 years, that there's a lot of focus on store brands. Loyalty is the name of the game. And to a large extent for many retailers, that is how they are driving the consumer back to their stores. So it's really a unique time for store brands that there is this convergence of forces, economic but also retailer oriented in terms of what is driving future growth for store brands.
Well, looking ahead, how confident do you say consumers will be in 2012?
That's when it starts to become very interesting, because to say that this consumer is becoming more confident is really a tough way to look at the consumer, because we have to peel away the onion a little bit and look at segments. And let me give you a little explanation of what I'm talking about. Households earning over $100,000, which are about 20% of households here in the U.S., they are increasingly more optimistic about the economy. We know that they are shopping more per trip, and they are increasing their level of trips and spending more per trip. Whereas households that are earning below $100,000, those 80%, they're still to a large extent on the sidelines and not back in the game as much. So we see this polarization of consumers being a very important dynamic, as it was in 2011 into 2012.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you, Jodi.
Well, getting consumers to buy your product and shop in your store has always been one of marketing's toughest challenges. Recently, Supermarket News surveyed store promotions and came up with a top 10 list that included some very interesting winners. Tim Simmons spoke to Carol Angrisani, who edited the magazine's report.
Carol, thanks for joining us today. After reading SN's special report on the top 10 store brand promotions of 2011, it really sounds to me like supermarkets are ramping up their social media programs.
They're much more aggressive than they have been in the past. They're getting much more savvy in the types of promotions they use, and they realize that social media is a great way to connect their brands with their customers. They can get real-time communication, they can get back and forth feedback, and they're actively getting involved in this.
One supermarket retailer you write about has been very successful with Twitter.
Yes, Giant Eagle has been particularly active in Twitter. In fact, they told me they're making a significant investment in Twitter promotions. And how they use Twitter is to really communicate with their customers and to get a back and forth feedback on new products, on new recipes that they use involving their brands. They run Twitter parties, which are within a designated time frame. They'll have a back and forth about a particular subject, and the customers love it. They get actively involved.
Then there's another supermarket that's been using beauty bloggers to build their private label sales.
H-E-B has created a beauty blog involving their own employees and also outside bloggers. Getting bloggers to write about your brand is valuable. It's an outside form of endorsement of your brand. And what H-E-B has done is use these bloggers to write about different beauty products that they're launching in their stores.
But your article also highlights some old-fashioned media. You write about one supermarket retailer who uses an RV and a billboard to promote a new brand.
That's Safeway. Safeway it's hard to really compete with Safeway in terms of private label marketing. They just know exactly how to promote their private label. And the way that they do that is to really identify the promotion with the brand meaning, the brand message, the brand focus. They tie their promotions and they bring their private label to life. And what they did with this promotion is they created an RV that was branded with Open Nature imaging, and Open Nature is their new natural private label. And they got one of their top executives who helped create the line, and she traveled the country promoting the brand in this RV.
But even this promotion was tied into social media.
Right, they knew exactly what to do. They gave it a social media component because the executive who was traveling in this custom recreation vehicle was blogging about her journey. So at each stop she would say what she did, some of the people she met, what they thought about the Open Nature private label. It was remarkable. Really, that's one of the top of the line promotions.
Back to you, Jodi.
Thank you, Tim. Well, retailers have also been in the news recently as they reposition themselves for the year ahead. Safeway sold off Gennardi's, Bi-Lo bought Winn-Dixie, and the employees of Associated Wholesale Grocers have become the owners of their own company. I asked Gary Giblen, who follows retailing for hedge funds, to explain just what's going on now and what's likely to happen in the months ahead. Well, you know, Wall Street has always looked at the bottom line. What's the financial health of retailers?
Well, you've got winners and losers at the extremes. So, you know, for every loser like Sears, you know, you have big winners that are both increasingly profitable and cash flow positive. For instance, a Whole Foods. Then you have corporate restructurings, which are doing good things for companies that have medium level problems. So Safeway struggled with Gennardi's when they acquired it. Now they've sold it. That's a good thing. Winn-Dixie was on again, off again, but not really getting to a major competitive strength. Now, as part of Bi-Lo, they're a force in the Southeast. So those are very good things. And look at outside of supermarketing, JCPenney. I mean, Jodi, that company is about as far gone as you can get, and yet through new turnaround management from outside the department store industry, there's things look promising there.
There's a lot of hype these days about the impact of technology on retailing. I mean, Amazon is looking to expand into groceries. Shoppers are using their smartphones. Are retailers worrying about that? And if so, do they feel it's going to have an impact?
Yeah, Jodi, let me answer the second part first. The smartphones and similar apps are making retailers truly lose sleep at night. And this is across all classes of retail. And that's because of one word or one term that is two words: pricing transparency. Consumers now can compare price whether they're in the store or at home or driving or at any time. So the need to be price competitive is greater than ever before, and that is a problem, and it's true even for supermarkets.
Well, Aldi is really ramping up its expansion in the United States. Are they succeeding?
Yes, Jodi, it is, and I think it's in a very quiet way. It's a private company, and so it's hard for people in the industry or even the Wall Street community to track them. But you can see that they're opening successfully at an accelerated rate. They're in the right place at the right time in terms of the penny-pinched consumer. And a lot of it gets back to increasing private label acceptance. It's one thing for a Safeway or a Kroger to increase private label and use their brand name, or Lucerne or something that is almost considered a brand by people on the West Coast. But Aldi is not that well known a store name, and so if they have an Aldi product or another name, corporate name that they might make up for a given category, it doesn't have name recognition, but people are willing to try and try to save money. So it's very powerful in that sense.
Let's talk about dollar stores. I've been in a lot recently, and they're adding a large food selection. Are they becoming a challenge to supermarkets?
It's kind of like Aldi. They've got the right price point. They are non-union operators, so they have a deeply fundamental lower cost of operation. And you can really save a lot of money, and not everybody in the consumer world knows that yet, but increasingly they're learning about that. So yeah, I mean, you can do almost all your household shopping at a dollar store. And what's interesting is it's not just the very lower income demographic folks now. I mean, they're definitely gaining customers from the declining middle class, shall we say. So it's a powerful format, and again, makes it tough to be price competitive as a conventional food retailer.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Jodi.
Well, government has also injected itself into retailing and private label with several initiatives. And Brian, you've been following all of this. So what is the status of the issues in Washington?
Well, Jodi, when you say Washington, there are several issues that are simmering. The biggest is the continuing debate over front of pack.
Well, what's happening with front of pack?
Well, front of pack is one of those issues that's caught up in the election. The whole idea is to provide information to the consumer that usually is on the side or the back of the pack, and this way they gain nutritional and health information about the product. Several cereal companies took the initiative several years ago of a program called Nutrition Keys that was going to develop this. Several retailers have moved into the category. Hannaford came up with Guiding Stars. Walmart has announced their own program. And there are several other programs. One is called NuVal, which all are trying to find a way to put information on the front of the pack.
So what would you say the result of all this is going to be?
Well, I think that the people in Washington who are in charge of trying to move this project through all feel that the presidential election will interfere with any decision. Congress will not enact anything. Everyone will keep waiting for the next person to react. And eventually, the Food and Drug Administration is expected to make a policy ruling.
Well, let's move from Washington over to California. What about states like California?
Well, I think you're right that there's a lot to be seen in states. California is one of the primary examples. It's not all in Washington. California, for example, has legislation that requires companies to do business there to state the origin of all of their ingredients and all of their packaging. And that's causing a tremendous amount of concern on the part of manufacturers, both branded and private label. There's also legislation that would require any genetically modified ingredient to be disclosed, and that's highly controversial.
Controversial, but probably better for the consumer.
Well, this is the battle that's going to be going on in California and probably other states as well. And it's one of the reasons why government has injected itself into the issue, both on the federal and on the state level. And
love the way you say injected. Like that.
Well, one is trying to find a politically neutral phrase. One, there are those who would say the government is sticking its nose in, and then there are those who would say government is coming to the rescue of the consumer. So injecting is a neutral way of saying this.
Well, we will be injecting more of our comments about this as months to come, but thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Well, that takes us to the end of another PLMA Live report. And I understand, Brian, that PLMA will now be starting a new website, and it's for consumers.
Yes.
Cool.
That is correct.
That's great.
PLMA will be launching our first consumer website. It's called Store Brands USA, and it includes information about store brands, helpful hints for home and health, and of course, recipes using store brands.
Recipes. Wow, I love recipes. Just a shame that we can't taste some of those recipes.
Did I hear you say can't?
I
no,
did,
no,
but
we never say can't.
I knew it.
In fact, we have a little testing kitchen down the hall.
I knew that too.
And we have 2 of the recipes that were developed by Chef Diane, and I thought it might be fun to taste some of the recipes right here on the air.
No argument from me.
So we're here in our test kitchen, and what we're going to be testing is a lovely individual chicken pot pie.
Yummy.
Main ingredients come from ShopRite, which of course is one of the main chains here in the Northeast. And some of the ShopRite ingredients are chicken broth and crescent rolls and extra virgin olive oil and frozen green peas. Are you ready?
Oh, I was ready 20 minutes ago.
Okay, go.
This looks really
So
yummy.
the spoon has now entered the chicken.
I know.
And
hold
the
on.
taste is about to be made. Wait, no, don't say anything. Let's do this in. You ready? Okay.
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun.
That's terrific.
That was really good.
Wow. And Dane did a good job cooking this up.
Can I double dip?
Have another one, yeah.
This is really yummy.
I knew it was supposed to go on to dessert, but frankly, did you bring wine? I would have some wine if you would.
Next time. I'll get that from the California
Good
store.
stuff. Wow.
This is really delicious.
Good job, Dane.
And this is going to be on our website. Now, we also have dessert, and this is coffee mocha mousse, and the main ingredients come from Ralph's Supermarkets, which, as you know, have over 400 locations in Southern California. And some of the yummy stuff in here are things like semi-sweet chocolate chips, organic sugar, organic vanilla extract, and organic instant coffee. And of course, the pièce de résistance, which is the
here's a
whipped
clean
cream.
spoon for you.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you so much.
Okay.
And I'm just going to add a little bit of this.
Coffee mocha mousse. Okay.
And this is really easy, and you mix it all up, heat up the semi-chocolate chips, and then freeze it, or not freeze it, put it in the fridge for about...
Do I taste bourbon in there? Is that a little bourbon?
Well, if so, I'm taking
I
it
don't
home.
know. It's very
this
good.
This is really yummy.
That is delicious.
And all of these recipes
Yes.
can be found on our new website. And the new website for PLMA's new consumer website is www.storebrandsusa.com. Stop eating.
Sorry.
That's storebrandsusa.com, and I hope you're going to come and visit the new site. And for Brian and myself, we're going to continue eating lunch. And that's it for this edition of PLMA Live, and we'll see you next time. All right, you can eat that. I'm going to try this. This is excellent.